Yeah, obviously you have to train all of these employees to be able to function an actual data center, which not all companies can afford, not all companies want to do. And obviously you can trust a maybe a bigger private cloud, but at the same time, the amount of cost that would really go into it, because typically they're smaller than what a public cloud would really look like.
What's the real difference between public, private, and hybrid cloud? How do you know which model is the best fit for your business? Today on Not Your Grandpa's JD Edwards, we'll break down the pros and cons of each model, how they impact security, cost, and performance, and the key factors that every business should consider before migrating. By the end of this episode, you'll have a clear framework to confidently choose the right cloud model for your JD Edwards system and enterprise applications.
Welcome to Not Your Grandpa's JD Edwards, the podcast where we take a modern, no nonsense approach to enterprise technology. I'm Nate Bushfield, and today we're talking about one of the biggest IT decisions companies face: choosing the right cloud model. To help us navigate this, I'm joined by Stuart Peterman, a cloud strategy expert who has guided numerous businesses through successful JD Edwards migrations without running into performance, compliance, or even cost issues. If your business is considering cloud migration or is struggling with an existing cloud setup, this episode is for you. Stu, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great, Nate. Thanks for having me.
Of course, it's great to see a familiar face on one of these podcasts again. Obviously, they're getting going and everything, but it's great to have you here. Thanks for. I know you have a very busy schedule, so thanks for joining us.
Never too
But
busy for you, Nate.
oh wow, it really warms the soul, warms the heart. But all right, let's get into it a little bit. Cloud migration is a huge decision, but most businesses struggle with where to start. Like, what happens if you choose the wrong model? Can public cloud really handle ERP workloads securely? Is private cloud just an expensive legacy approach? Is hybrid cloud the safest bet or just the most complex? So, Stu, in your experience, what are the biggest mistakes companies make when deciding their cloud model?
Yeah, and thanks for that, Nate. I think the biggest mistake a company can make is not understanding their internal priorities when they're making those decisions, not having a set strategy, and not really understanding what the benefits of the public, private, or hybrid cloud scenarios are.
Right, right. I mean, it's one of the biggest issues and one of the hardest things to really look through. Obviously, you have to do your research. You have to dive in deep to really understand what each thing can really do for you. I know a lot of public cloud, they have more options, more applications, different things that you can really mess around with compared to a private or even a hybrid model. So for those like applications and that side of thing, like, is there more customization, or is it easier for companies to access those? Tell me a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so one of the primary drivers that companies at least should have when looking at the public cloud are: what doors does it open? What applications, products, services do I now have access to when I'm hosted in the public cloud? There are a litany of different services that you can take advantage of. AWS has SageMaker, Oracle has their AI offering. You also have Oracle's autonomous data warehouse or autonomous database. You also have access to incredible analytics and business intelligence tools that can connect directly to the public cloud. So it really opens the door to things that can make an impact to the business. I don't know a business out there that couldn't benefit from having real-time dashboards populated into their, let's say, legacy ERP system. And if you have a connector to, let's say, Oracle Analytics Cloud, you can funnel those directly into your, let's say, JD Edwards instance so that you can see in real time the data that would take you maybe 20, 30 minutes to run a report on.
Right. And honestly, cutting down the amount of time that a lot of these companies are spending doing a lot of these different things. I mean, the amount of productivity that is gained back from utilizing some of these tools is just insane if you really think about it. So let's simplify it a little bit more. What's the real differences between public, private, and even a hybrid cloud?
That's a great question. And let's start with the public cloud, or talk about the public cloud hyperscalers, I guess, if you will. The primary ones that we deal with on a day-to-day basis are Oracle Cloud Infrastructure, Amazon Web Services, and Microsoft Azure. Now, there are quite a few others. There's Google Cloud, there's Huawei Cloud, but we'll just stick to the ones that we know for now. A public cloud is a large organization that has the resources and essentially the infrastructure to be able to provide extensive services at scale that are elastic, high performance. You're not tied to maybe the same restrictions that you would be in perhaps a private cloud or on premise or even potentially in a hybrid cloud environment. So, in short, those large hyperscalers give you the resources that no singular one business could provide themselves.
Right. Right.
Now,
So, yeah, with a
oh, go ahead.
private cloud, obviously it's a little bit different. Can you dive in a little bit deeper on that?
Yeah, so private cloud often is described two different ways. Some companies who are large enough and have the wherewithal to do this own their own data centers. They host their own servers, they have their own workloads inside, in many cases, their building. And that is, in its truest essence, their private cloud. But there are also other private cloud options that are provided for organizations who want to essentially outsource maybe the hosting and management of those workloads and servers to a company that has a data center offsite that they manage and have staff on site at all times, making sure that essentially everything is secure. If, for instance, there is an event, they can address that quickly. They have resources on site for that as well. And ongoing managed services is provided for them as well. Now, it presents its own benefits and drawbacks. If you have your own private cloud environment, it means you have ultimate control. And many companies want to retain that ultimate control. And I don't blame them. Some companies have compliance requirements that they need to adhere to. They also, unfortunately, have some drawbacks. And those drawbacks come in the form of, deploying resources. So, unfortunately, if you have a group of people that need to be contacted to deploy resources, sometimes it takes a little bit more time than, let's say, if you needed to scale or deploy resources in the public cloud, which can happen instantaneously.
Right. And yeah, obviously you have to train all of these employees to be able to function an actual data center, which not all companies can afford, not all companies want to do. And obviously you can trust a maybe a bigger private cloud, but at the same time, the amount of costs that would really go into it, because typically they're smaller than what a public cloud would really look like. So I mean, obviously that's a little bit more expensive. It takes a lot more time to really get anything done. While these businesses have other structure that is the real money makers, so maybe they don't really want to host their own data, which takes a lot of time. Takes a lot of manpower to really get behind it and build it up. So about like a hybrid cloud model, would like is the balance of both really just a complex way of saying like you should do this, but I'm not really familiar with what a hybrid really looks like. So can you dive in on what that kind of looks like and why a company would go that route?
Yeah, and quickly, I do want to address something you brought up too. The human capital side of things is its own separate animal.
Mhm.
Making sure that you have the resources either internally or the organization that you're vetting out from a private cloud perspective has the right resources is it introduces complexities well beyond managing and deploying and running workloads in a public, private, or hybrid cloud fashion. So it was an interesting point. It's good that you brought it up. But to go over to what a hybrid cloud environment looks like, organizations sometimes have sensitive workloads that they are just not comfortable hosting in the public cloud. Now, I would make the argument that the public cloud has come a really long way in terms of its security and essentially adherence to government or even other compliances that you may be adhering to yourself. But some companies think that they don't want to introduce those workloads to the public cloud for fear of either losing control or the risk that it presents. So, in some cases, they will split their workloads and have some hosted in the public cloud, some either on prem or in a private cloud environment. And the reasons they might do that are if they're subject to GDPR compliance or FedRAMP compliance or any list of compliance regulations that they may be subject to depending on their industry. So for that reason, they have split those workloads. They manage some either on premise or in a private cloud environment, and then some in the public cloud. Now, sometimes they do all three, and sometimes they even split those public cloud providers just to, I guess, hedge their bets and reduce that risk even further. And as you mentioned, that really does introduce a lot of complexity. Uh, I don't even have to go into the different contracts they have to manage and renewals that come up if they're managing, let's say, two or even three different public cloud providers. But then they have to make sure they have the resources on staff. Do they have the right resources to manage those workloads internally? Do they have too many? Do they have too few? So it really does introduce quite a bit of complexity. I understand its importance in some cases, but I certainly would not want to be the head of an organization's cloud practice that has to manage all of those various, cloud hosting strategies, solutions, providers. Managing one is difficult enough.
Yeah, I can only imagine what you go through on a daily basis, but going into a hybrid cloud model would kind of be insane. It's hard for me to even really wrap my head around for the amount of manpower, the amount of time that would really be spent just organizing it, making sure there are no gaps in any knowledge or data. Oh man, the amount of time that must go into that would be insane. But
Monitoring performance,
yeah,
monitoring your spend and your cost because, you know, if you don't monitor, let's say, some public cloud providers closely, your costs can sometimes spin out of control. If you need a tech refresh and you're on premise, then you're incurring quite a bit of
mhm,
capex. I mean, that's going to hit your capex pretty significantly. So all of those things together, and then managing not just the performance and scalability, but the budget associated with it as well. It is definitely quite an undertaking.
yeah. I honestly can only think of one reason that you'd be in a hybrid cloud, and that's if you're trying to get your private data center to the public cloud. But there are companies out there that have sensitive information that they maybe don't choose, like which is or choose to share, which is what you said earlier. And honestly, like I understand that, but the amount of complexity and the amount of work that really goes into a hybrid cloud feels like it's sometimes not worth it, especially in the last 5 years. Obviously, there's been a big change in what public cloud really is. It really has upgraded the security on it, the data security, privacy, like everything is really taken to the next level. I mean,
Yeah,
makes a lot of
and
sense.
and in terms of the advancement that the public cloud has made, I think most people who are listening to this podcast will be aware of Microsoft securing those incredibly
Mhm.
large government contracts a few years ago. Now, it didn't necessarily come to fruition, and that's a completely different story. But the public cloud has come a long way. That said, I do want to make a note to say that there are instances where a hybrid cloud model is not only the smart idea, but absolutely necessary. I mean, if you hold significant government contracts to the tune of hundreds of millions or billions of
Mm,
dollars, then you don't want to risk that contract coming into question because of public cloud practices. So there certainly are scenarios where it is absolutely necessary, but still very complicated and
mhm.
certainly not something that I personally will want to have to manage on my side.
Yeah, they're for the bigger companies that can spend their capital on a hybrid practice, which makes a lot of sense, but who knows? I mean, maybe in a few years it'll be all public or all private, and just shifting away from the hybrid cloud. Obviously, there will always be the need for it for certain contracts, but for the most part, we'd probably see the other two. So, how should businesses really decide between a public or a private or a hybrid? And what are some of the key questions that they should ask before they choose?
Yeah, that's a really good question, and I'll address a portion of it. There's no way we could address all of it in the time that we have, but we'll start with public cloud. If you're wondering whether or not you should migrate to the public cloud, you need to just ask yourself first and foremost, do I have any workloads, ancillary applications, anything that would potentially be at risk moving to the public cloud? Because as we mentioned earlier, I think that the public cloud has come a very long way, especially over the past 5 years or so when it comes to long-term security and ensuring that those workloads are not subject to any, let's say, malicious activity. But, if you do have, let's say, a very valuable government contract that is subject to government regulation, the public cloud may adhere to that regulation, but it may not give you the sense of control and comfort that you want. So assess whether or not those workloads that you have are safe or sufficient to be hosted in the public cloud. Now, the second is, what am I hoping to gain by moving to the public cloud? You really need to think as an organization 10 years down the road, 5 years down the road, what do I want to take advantage of that the public cloud offers me? And there is no shortage of services or products that you can have access to. If you value utilizing data in a more efficient way, let's say in the coming 3 years, then the public cloud is more than likely the route that you would want to go. At least in a hybrid environment. But you know, if you're not subject to those compliances that we were talking about earlier, you might want to go full bore into the public cloud. Um, if you want that data to go into, let's say, from a data lake into something like an Oracle's autonomous data warehouse, where you can first and foremost ensure that that data is clean, that it is going to give you the proper results, because as everyone knows, bad data gives bad results. Then you can funnel it into something like an Oracle Analytics Cloud, and then maybe even connect that to your ERP system to where you're getting real-time dashboards to show you things like paid invoices or unpaid invoices, late invoices, sales orders coming in. I know of a few companies that have had, let's say, scenarios where they have turnover with their customer service representatives, and they wanted to be able to utilize their data to give their customer service representatives a little push in the right direction when it comes to customer interaction. So if you are a company that wants to take advantage of something that is innovative and can start to give your business a little bit of an edge against maybe some competitors, then you should really look into the public cloud. Um, in many cases, people look to the public cloud for things like cost savings. And I am very much a staunch believer that that should never be your top priority, but it is a reality. And you can save, if not just in certain areas, as a whole by moving to the public cloud, depending on what public cloud that is. Now, if we're talking about, let's say, a private cloud environment, let's say you want to get out of the pipes and plumbing of managing your own on-premise infrastructure, or even your own personal private cloud, and you want to outsource that to an organization that has a data center that can help provide managed services, then you should think about the private cloud. It also offers quite a bit of control and security. They have people in those data centers sitting around all the time just in case something happens. And that can be something like, a potentially malicious event to,
Mhm.
hey, a plug got kicked and unplugged and we need to replug that in. Or maybe we have an issue with some hardware that we need to replace or repair. Um, and then when you're talking about the hybrid cloud environment, it's kind of a mix of both. Do I want to take advantage of some of what the public cloud offers me? Some of those, let's say, data analytics or, you know, uh, database options that other
Hmm.
companies that have those scale and resources can provide me. And, that is their job, is to create a compelling offering to be able to present to a company like me to say, you know, wow, this is a pretty innovative new piece of technology. It could be AI, it could be
Hmm.
something that you and your organization are really excited to start taking on. But then at the same time, you have those sensitive workloads and you want to make sure that those things are not subject to any sort of scrutiny from any of, let's say, the customers that you have, or even any government regulations. So, you know, there are a lot of things that you need to consider when you're making that evaluation. There are things all the way down to, are there certain applications that I have that run better on one cloud versus the other? And that is certainly the case. Is there a licensing, issue that I should consider? Do I have a certain number of on-premise licenses for one particular company that I need to be concerned with moving into the public cloud of a different company? Are there cost-effective, let's say, options that these public clouds can provide me that other public clouds don't? And they can be as simple as data egress policies. Some public
Hmm.
clouds out there have extremely advantageous data egress policies that can allow me as a company to save a significant amount of money, whereas others charge quite a bit for those things, and those costs can spiral out of control. So it really spans every bit of your organization, and not just your general IT
Yeah.
org, but even finance, even security and compliance. So, it really benefits to have a third party help take a look at that and say, hey guys, we're going to dive deep and we're going to interview various stakeholders at your organization. We're going to understand where you are best suited. And that may not be the public cloud. That may not be even hybrid cloud. We may, get to the end of this and say, hey guys, I think you are still better suited to be hosted in a private cloud environment. But really having a third party take a good hard look without the internal maybe politics you may have at your organization is always a good practice.
Oh yeah. I mean, and of course, like when people are choosing this and when businesses are really looking at it, they also have to worry about who's managing their cloud environment. I mean, that's the main thing that I would worry about at least. And I mean, that's actually a perfect segue. That kind of brings us right into the thing that ERP Suite just did with the Oracle's Cloud Managed Services Provider certification. I know you were on the forefront of that, but a lot of customers don't really understand what that would mean. So let's go into a little bit. Can you explain what it means for a company to become MSP certified by Oracle?
Yeah, absolutely. And what it means for a company that has become a cloud managed services provider for Oracle, it means that they have opened themselves up and their practices to a third party audit. Oracle puts together a list of audit criteria, a list of controls that this company needs to show that they have practices and, more importantly, documentation for replication of those practices at scale to show that they can handle, build, you know, deploy, run, and manage those Oracle and non-Oracle workloads in the Oracle cloud, and that they have the resources, experience to be able to do that. So it is a fairly stringent audit. It is done by a third party. That third party, over a 2-day period, dives pretty deeply into those various controls and essentially at the end of it decides whether or not you as an organization are fit to be an Oracle Cloud Managed Services provider. So I'm very happy to say that we passed that audit with flying colors. We actually did not miss out on a single control. But I
Oh,
think that's a testament to the people at ERP Suites. And I can tell you, as the glorified wrangler of those resources, they were absolutely incredible in providing assistance and their expertise in the process of that audit. So, if you're watching, anyone from ERP Suites, thank you very much for your assistance.
Always great to shout out everybody that was working behind the scenes. I know you were a little bit more at the forefront, but I know there was a lot of work that really went into it. And seriously, congratulations. I know there are some people out there that probably already thought that we had this because of how great ERP Suites really has been with Oracle and the partnerships that are behind it. But it is great to finally have this underneath the ERP Suites bubble. So it is very, very impressive that we were able to complete this. Seriously, like this incredible stuff. So a little bit of an after the fact, like after someone watches this, what would you want them to do? What is the next steps? How would they learn more about these different options of cloud? And what does the ERP Suites offer in terms of a next step?
Yeah, that's a great question. Thanks for asking. I would encourage any customer or prospective customer or anyone who is generally curious about what might be the best fit for their organization from a cloud hosting perspective is to come and talk to us. We have developed a very comprehensive cloud assessment framework that covers, as I mentioned earlier, everything from security, compliance. We talk to finance users, we talk to end power users, we talk to executives and decision makers within an organization to understand what their strategy really is, top to bottom, and adhere that strategy to a specific cloud provider. And could be multiple cloud providers, it could be a hybrid cloud environment. We may get to the end of an assessment like that and say, you know what, guys, what you're doing today is absolutely perfect. You should keep doing what you're doing. But the important part about that assessment is the findings are so extensive, but we give them to you at the end of that. So they are
Mhm.
yours to keep. It is a week-long process. We cover every segment of your organization, every business unit that is impacted by, let's say, a cloud migration, and then we provide the findings to you so that you can have those. Maybe you don't want to make the decision today or tomorrow or this year or even next year, but that information is incredibly valuable to any organization. And we have the expert resources to be able to dive into what makes the most sense for you and your organization.
Right. Well, yeah, I mean, obviously, it's something that a lot of people will think about and want to go through. But if that's not for you, you can always schedule a free consultation on erpsuites.com. Very easy, a few clicks. You can talk to Stu, you can talk to any number of our cloud people that we have here, and they will help you get to that next step. So, again, thank you for tuning in for Not Your Grandfather's JD Edwards. If this episode helped you think differently about cloud migration, subscribe, share it with your team, schedule that free consultation. If you have any questions about Oracle Cloud MSP providers, connect with us on LinkedIn or at erpsuites.com. We'll see you next time.